Mansion's amazing secrets. Workers called to clear the contents of a house in Benridding, Ilkley, have been faced with a formidable task. Every room in the large Victorian mansion, known as Rye Hill, in Margerison Road, was piled high with books, newspapers, parcels, clothing, and even a car. The car, believed to be a 1931 Morris Isis, was found resting on bricks in the main part of the building after being laid up probably at the end of the break of the 39-45 war. The operation to clear the contents was so massive that in the first 2 weeks 9 skips were used and 500 refuse bags and 5 council lorries were filled. Today, the operation was still in progress as workers continued to sort articles ranging back over the past 90 years. The estate agents appointed to sell the house and police said it was necessary to keep quiet about the operation until all valuables were removed. This has now been done, and the valuables will be put on sale by auction in the near future. The house belonged to Miss Mary Booth, who died last year. She had lived with her bachelor brother, Mr. Harry Booth, who died the year before. It is believed she left no will, but had a distant relation in the south. As workers entered the house, they were confronted with piles of books, newspapers, and could only examine the property by following a single-filed passageway between the books piled up on both floors. It was estimated that the 5-bedroomed house contained in excess of 25,000 books. They stood in piles over 4 feet high, and it was almost impossible to enter the one room, which had become storerooms for the massive books, newspapers, magazines, and parcels. Many of the parcels had been unopened, and there were more than 300 pairs of unused shoes in original boxes. The collection spans most of this century, and it was a common sight to see a copy of the Daily Mirror from the 1920s in perfect condition lying at the side of an equally perfect Christmas number of the Illustrated London News for 1899 and 1907. The kitchen contained vast quantities of tinned and bottled fruit. There were several boxes of corned beef, and shelves were crammed with rusted tins of vegetables and fish. Oh, God. Estate agent Mr. John Hardy said Miss Booth was a most cultured and well-loved Ilkley character. A vast quantity of the books, shoes and clothes and fabrics had been collected by welfare and charitable organisations from all over the Bradford metropolitan district. Rye Hill was last in the news during 1959 and 1960, when the former Ilkley Urban District Council expressed concern over the house's condition. January the 21st, 1981. Books ought to be sold. £250,000 estimate of Recluse's estate. Thousands of books hoarded by Ilkley recluse Miss Mary Booth, who collapsed and died in December, aged 76, are to be auctioned at Leeds in April. A private estimate of the proceeds likely to be raised from the sale and the disposal of Miss Booth's Victorian mansion puts her estate near the 250,000 mark. Miss Booth, who did not leave a will, had no near relatives, but solicitors have traced a distant relation in the London area. Inquiries carried out by the Telegraph and Argus suggests that the likely beneficiary of the estate is a viscount, but this has so far not been confirmed. Bachelor Mr. Harry Booth lived with his spinster sister at the house Rye Hill in Mergerson Road, Benridding, until his death 2 years ago. Mr. John Hardy of Heffel Watson and Son, the estate agents responsible for removing the books from the house, as well as putting the property up for sale, said it had been a massive task. It has been estimated that the house contained more than 25,000 books. He said they stood in piles 4 feet high, and it was almost impossible to enter some rooms. There were also unopened parcels and more than 300 pairs of unused shoes in original boxes. Phillips, the Leeds Fine Auctioneers, will take charge of the sale of books and other items in April. Well, the house will be put on the market in March. Mr. Hardy said Miss Booth's father was a Bradford wool merchant and a well author.
A what?
Well author.
Well author?
Yeah, so it says. Some of his...
Known author, I suppose.
Ah, well, they haven't got that bit in. A well-known author. Some of his original books and egg collections were still in the house, and they should raise a large sum of money. Apparently, on the instruction of the London relatives, Mr. Hardy has the added task of giving some of the books, shoes and fabrics to schools and Ilkley charity organisations. Although Miss Booth rarely permitted anybody to enter the house, she was a regular visitor to Ilkley town centre in the summer, and would pop into the reference library.
And pop out.
She is said by friends to have been a cultured and well-liked Ilkley character, who, when she was fit enough, used to ride a cycle through the town with music coming from the transistor radio in her basket. Oh, the little rebel. One neighbour in Margeston Road, Mrs. Monica Callin, said they had been friends for 3 years, but she had never entered Miss Booth's house. She was a lively and intelligent person, but she hardly ventured out in the winter months, like me. I never saw any visitors to the house, and she hardly ever put the lights on. Mary Booth's frugal habits were confirmed by the vicar of Ben Ridding, the Reverend Michael Savage, who believed that her hoarding instincts were based on a belief that another war might come and she would need rations to get through it. This was probably the reason she kept tin food going back to the 1939-45 war. Many local people found it difficult to understand her lifestyle, but she did not infringe on other people and was in many ways a most likeable person. He's dead now, is Dr. Savage.
People have a habit of dying.
Sorry?
People have a habit of dying. Actually, I can tell you what, she didn't keep it for the Third World War. She kept it because she was frightened of being accused of...
11th of February 1981. The 1930s Morris spent 35 years in garage. A vintage car spluttered back into life yesterday after 35 years in a garage. The 1930 Morris Ices was among an Aladdin's cave of forgotten treasures found in a house in Ilkley, Yorkshire. Workmen found the car in a semi-derelict garage next to a rambling detached house formerly occupied by Miss Mary Booth. Also in the garage they discovered hundreds of boxfuls of tinned food which had been stockpiled in 1920. Every room in the 5-bedroomed house was filled with Miss Booth's collections. The car had not been used since the end of the war. It will now be auctioned by estate agents acting for Miss Booth.
You notice the difference in the facts? It's the end of the war now, so
Yeah.
it's the beginning. It's
Yes.
1920, not 1939. Sorry.
Yes. One of the estate agents, we were amazed when we went inside the house. Miss Booth was a compulsive collector and saved everything from old newspapers to antiques. She never used the car, but went everywhere on bicycle. The car is in a remarkable condition. After we replaced the battery, it started first time. Yesterday it was driven out of Miss Booth's drive in Margeston Road, Ilkley, by former Morris production line worker Mr. Jack Twine. Now 65 and retired, Mr. Twine said, "We built cars to last in those days. There is hardly a spot of rust on it, and I reckon it's good for another 35 years. The rest of Miss Booth's treasure trove included 25,000 books, 300 pairs of shoes, and thousands of parcels of food. An old newspaper will be auctioned in May." A neighbour said the old lady was something of a recluse. She has no close surviving relatives. That bod would come into a nice packet then, wouldn't he?
It's so-called Viscount, isn't it?
Was he a Viscount?
I don't know. No, I don't know who you are.
Woman's Wildlife Library, 6th of May 1981. Nearly 200 books, prints, maps and ephemera from the 25,000 similar items found stacked in an Aladdin's cave at Ben Ridding, Ilkley, after the death of Miss Mary Booth, are to be auctioned by Phillips of Leeds tomorrow. The collection was amassed by Miss Booth's father, Harry Blamires Booth, a Bradford wool merchant who became a well-known authority on wildlife. Among the lots at the sale will be a large number of Mr. Booth's notes made during his many years of natural history observations. Earlier this year, council workers called to clear the contents of the 5-bedroomed Booth home, Rye Hill, Marshton Road, Benridding, found every room and passage piled high with thousands of books, newspapers, parcels, 300 pairs of shoes, and many boxes of food. In 1930, a 1930 Morris Ices car found in the garage was later auctioned for £8,000. After 2 weeks' work, the workmen had filled 9 skips, 500 refuse bags, and 5 lorries with the contents of the house, which included the 1903 wedding dress worn by Miss Booth's mother, subsequently sold for £50. In tomorrow's sale will be books on topography, history, natural history, and ornithology, as well as the children's and illustrated books. Harry Blamires Booth, born in 1866, the son of a Bradford wool merchant, sailed before the mast to the Antipodes at the age of 17. Conditions on board ship, according to letters he sent to his mother, which were found in the house, were so appalling that he and 10 other apprentices jumped ship. While he was in Australia, doing any work that came along, young Harry Booth's interest in wildlife was stimulated. It was an interest which remained with him all his life, during which he became an authority on veritable zoology. He was also a recognized authority on the textile trade and British sheep, in whose wool he specialized as head of the Bradford textile firm H.B. Booth and Company Limited, wool merchants, which he founded. He was also one of the founders of the British Wool Federation and was chairman for 25 years of the English Fleece Committee. Elected as a member of the Yorkshire Naturalist Union in 1905, he later occupied many offices, including that of president. He made many valuable contributions to the work of the Union, of which he was an active supporter until his death in 1941. May, Bob for a Fox's Head. Over 300 years ago, the bounty payment for a fox's head was 1 shilling. Yet 150 years later, the payment was exactly the same. Inflation seems to have been an unknown factor in those far-off days. The bob and hob payments were made by the Kildwick Church. What am I reading this for?
I don't know.
Oh God, because it was all marked and oh God.